Welcome to the Sub 1000 Recruitment Podcast. With so much of the recruitment industry conversation aimed at big enterprise talent acquisition teams, we decided recruiters at smaller everyday organizations need to be heard. In 2023, we launched our free-to-join Sub 1000 online community. We have thousands of in-house recruiters and HR professionals from everyday organizations who recruit less than 1,000 staff a year, in some cases less than 100. And if you are listening to this, you've probably guessed the next bit. We've also launched a podcast to hear direct from those recruiters. Their stories, insights and experiences about how they get the job done on a limited budget with limited support in either a small team or perhaps completely on their own. Tune in every fortnight to hear from your direct peers. And if you want to get involved, join our free online community at sub1000.com. This week's episode is sponsored by our friends at Personio. Personio is the flexible HR platform that adapts to how you work. Try it today.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Sub 1000 podcast. Today we're joined by Ryan, who is an employee brand and talent attraction specialist. So thanks for coming on to the podcast today, Ryan. We like to do a little intro and ask the same two questions to every guest we have on the podcast. So can you tell us how you got into recruitment and just tell us a little bit about your career to date?
Yeah, of course. And thanks so much for having me on first and foremost. But yes, how you get into recruitment is the age-old question, isn't it? Typically answered with, I fell into it. But I am one of the very weird ones who actually seeked recruitment out. I knew I didn't want to go to university. So I travelled the world as cabin crew for Virgin Atlantic for 4 or 5 years. And as I got to that 4 or 5 year mark, I started to look into career options. I loved dealing with people and I loved sort of resolving problems as per sort of being cabin crew and being stuck in a metal tube for hours on end. And so I self-funded the entry-level CIPD course. So I think it's like a level 3 it starts up by. And then applied to, that took about like 6 months, give or take. And then applied to every recruitment admin job that I could find because I really enjoyed the recruitment module in the CIPD course. And I made those applications until someone took a risk on me. And almost a decade later, here I am, still doing it, still enjoying it. So I must have got something right. And then in terms of my career to date, so as I say, I started off in those sort of recruitment admin, recruitment advisor roles, which were all very high volume roles, very hamster wheel, revolving doors, however you want to refer to them. But a lot of people very quickly with a lot of deadlines. So looking back, it was horrendously stressful and incredibly high pressure. But equally amazing in terms of experience to learn so much so quickly in terms of how to attract, how to hunt, engage and convert talent. It was so important. And I think every role, although it wasn't agency, although every role pretty much was in-house, it felt like an agency to some extent because you had to sit on every candidate. And I say that in the nicest sort of way, and the fact that you had to sort of keep on top of them, keep tabs, keep them engaged. Because as soon as you lost one candidate, it then snowballed into you losing multiple. So after, I think I did sort of that for around about 3, 4, maybe 5 years of sort of high volume recruiting. I wanted to specialize a bit more. And at the time, employer brand was this sort of new term that was being sort of banded around quite a lot more. It was building in popularity. So I boomeranged back to AQA, which is one of, if not the largest exam board in the UK, so the one that does all the GCSEs and A-levels. And I joined them, or rejoined them as a recruitment marketing consultant. Now, AQA is a Herculean operation. You don't really think about it, but to get 11 million exams marked, it takes an army, a lot of skill and quite a few prayers to get it done. And so when I walked into the role of recruitment marketing, it was fairly new, and so nothing really existed. And what did exist, it was sort of just thrown together and didn't really work. So it took a lot of networking, took a lot of failure, and it took a lot of learning from data, and eventually we got the job done. So what we had during COVID this year, we had the record-breaking year in terms of application conversions, which was absolutely amazing. And that was to get teachers to mark exams, and teachers who are time poor anyway, are tired, and especially during COVID when the news was sort of ransacked with what was going on in the teaching community, they were being pushed to keep students up to date. And so to also on the side ask them, oh, could you come and mark 300 odd exams for a little bit of cash and some professional development to put on your CV, that's all we had as a sell. And on top of that, AQA being a charity, budget was particularly thin. So as you can imagine, the campaigning to get teachers to mark exams had to be fairly aggressive, and it had to be sort of quite guerrilla-like. And as I say, was all led by data in terms of what works best, in terms of our home advertising, as well as marketing through news articles, through PR, through email blasts, third parties, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, as I say, we got there. And then on top of that, my role also sort of dabbled in the 1,000-odd temporary workers, so customer service, administrators, who helped get the job done, that they recruit across the UK, so Manchester, Surrey, and Milton Keynes at the time. And then also I was dabbling in sort of like a permanent and fixed term contract recruitment marketing as well. So that was all about sort of like content and helping the team engage candidates and convert talent as much as possible. So following on from that, I wanted more sort of like European exposure. So that's when I discovered AVIV Group, which is where I am now. And I joined as a recruitment marketing manager because of many, many factors, which I won't go into. I naturally took on more of a TA operations role. So I now look after the hiring process, vendors, as well as sort of recruitment marketing. I've not lost that. The reporting, data, and general sort of best practice within recruitment across the recruiting funnel. The TA team is stretched across Europe, primarily in Germany, France, and Belgium. We also have some others sort of based out of the UK and Switzerland. So yeah, so it's tough because it's not only language barriers, cultural barriers, but legislating barriers perhaps as well. I'm having to overcome, but it's exposing me more and more to different elements of TA and change management within TA as well. So yeah, so it's a really interesting role. I'm really enjoying it and hoping to stick around for a lot longer because there's so much more to do.
So Ryan, given your experience in TA operations, what advice or maybe guidance would you give to other TA teams in order to ensure that they're operating at their maximum capacity or kind of being efficient?
Yeah, so I think everything in recruitment comes with the disclaimer, it depends on the business. So its size, its maturity, its budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I will give a general sort of broad brush answer, which I hope doesn't end up with people hunting me down with pitchforks. So I'm a big advocate of simplicity. And I know it's really easy to say and easy to think, but it's also equally easy to run down a rabbit hole of complexity and forget about those basics, that sort of simplicity. So I put out a post recently on LinkedIn, which was all about when I worked at Virgin Atlantic. They had this motto of brilliant basics, magic touches. And that one comes before the other for a reason. So brilliant basics comes first before you implement sort of magic touches. So the idea being you have to get those basics right constantly and consistently. An example I see really often nowadays is HR managers and recruiters shouting about employer branding or AI, because that's the fancy new term that's being bounded around, and thinking, well, if we recruit using social media, which is what people think employer brand is and only is, then that will be the remedy to all our hiring problems. But all the while, their job adverts are more like job descriptions, their outreach messages are templates that they wrote 3 years ago. And that's not to downplay the importance of social media and recruitment, It's a necessary part of the awareness and traction and engagement phases, but to focus all your time on that is because it's the fancy new term, and therefore ignoring the basics, which are your job adverts, which are your sort of outreach. It just means that your basics aren't right, and you're trying to implement the magic touches without sort of implementing those basics. So to round off, get the simple bits first. And then I say simple, they aren't simple, it's difficult, and you will always iterate on them, you'll always try and improve them, but just make sure those are ticking along in the background before you start running down the rabbit holes of ChatGPT or employer branding and trying to define what that is. Get the basics right.
So just staying with that for a second, Ryan, what would you say kind of those simple touches you want to make sure you're getting right, and how might in-house TA teams maybe almost sense check them to see if they are simple and right?
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, from my perspective, I'm of course going to focus heavily on the attraction part and the engagement part. So look at your job adverts, look at your outreach messages. So if you're sending emails to communities or talent pools you've created, or even on LinkedIn, your in-mails, send it to your director. Send your typical message to your director and see what they have to say, because your director's probably receiving, well, countless amounts of messages on a weekly basis from other recruiters who are trying to get them to move to a new company, and get them to judge how your message is received comparative to all those other messages they're receiving. That's a really simple way of sort of judging your outreach. In terms of your adverts, if they look like everyone else's, they're not adverts, is the best way of explaining it. And I know that there's sort of this thing where, well, we want to look like all the other people and therefore sort of fit in, and we don't want to go outside the box, which is absolutely fine. But when you have a job advert which is sort of structured in this is who we are, and this is what we want, and this is what we want the person to be doing every day, it's all very top down and it doesn't excite people, and the language you use is primarily more job description than it is primarily job advert. An advert should be an advert. It should attract people. It should make people think, oh, that's something I want to do. And so just having a look at the language you're using in your job advert, and again, the language you're using in your outreach messages, that's the first part to focus on. The other stuff will come. So looking at sort of how you assess candidates, I would say that's probably secondary, and people are going to probably be, might have other opinions on that. But I would say focus on your attraction, focus on the engagement of talent. If you can get that right, you're getting people through the door. And then you can work on the assessment, the candidate touch points, and the conversion at the end to offer. But let's start getting people and the right people through the door.
And we all know that data is very important in various sectors and various functions within any sector. But can you share, Ryan, how you perhaps have utilised or how might you use data and insights and analytics within a talent operations function to help understand what's going on, and then maybe get some key actions or to-dos off the back of that data?
Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, data's my best friend. I wouldn't be where I am in my career without the confidence that data gives me. It's my secret weapon in all conversations. There is room for anecdotal and feelings, but nothing hits harder than numbers when it comes to influencing how your TA team should be structured, how they should be operating, where their focuses should be across the recruitment funnel. Examples I can give, and I'll focus on sort of candidate experience here, is if you were at sort of step 0 and you didn't really know where to go with in terms of candidate experience, the most straightforward option is satisfaction surveys. We've all done them, whether or not that was you went on holiday and they sent you a survey, or you went to a restaurant, wherever it is. Most of the time you'll receive sort of like a 5-question survey, and that's the easiest place to start. And it's not to be sent 3 months after they start, it's to send every or send at every main touch point within the recruitment process. And again, it doesn't need to be 18 questions. 3 is fine, 5 is fine. The shorter, the better. But for example, when they make an application, does your automated email or email generally have a link to a quick 1 to 10 score? How was your experience? Are you using sort of that net promoter score sort of question? Just after that initial, how did you find the website? How did you find the application process? Did you have to put your CV in and then give us all your information, all that sort of stuff? And then same again for the interview, regardless of the outcome. So if you reject a candidate, send them a survey. And I know people are scared of that negative feedback, but there's 2 key positives to asking for direct feedback from a candidate that you just rejected. Firstly, you'll get some honesty, and they're less likely to then go on to fill out a Glassdoor survey, where they publicly berate you on Glassdoor. So yeah, get every single touch point. Have a survey that goes out, and it doesn't need to be a survey in the sense it needs to be sort of 18 to 20 questions. It can be 1 question, it can be sort of 3, it can be 5. The shorter the better, but ask the questions in there that you want to know the answer to. There's loads of other bits and bobs that you can do in terms of sort of the candidate experience, but also think about the experiences of others in your recruitment process. So think about your hiring managers, think about your stakeholders like HR, also think about the recruiter experience. What do they think of the process? What would they change? Why and how? You'll never please everyone, but at the very least, it'll show where the majority of your stakeholders' pain points are. So that's in terms of sort of candidate experience, which is a big topic nowadays. Surveys are, of course, sort of the easiest tool to use and the quickest way and the best way to sort of collate quantitative data. You can also do sort of sessions with candidates who have recently joined the company, and I say recently because you want that experience to be fresh in their mind. Get them all into a virtual room or a meeting room and ask them questions and nitpick and delve deeper and find out really sort of where those pain points were, what they didn't like, what they did like, and how you can then expand on that. So
you've had lots of experience, Ryan. You've worked in various different TA related roles, and I assume you've designed recruitment processes, you've looked at recruitment processes, but moving jobs at some point, you also might be a candidate applying for jobs. We all know that recruitment processes can be super simple. We also know recruitment processes can be really complicated. So can you share any experiences where you've had to improve or streamline a recruitment process when you've worked for an organization, and maybe if there's any tips about where TA professionals might want to start or might aid them in influencing the change needed?
Yeah, fair enough. So it's actually something I'm doing right now at AVIV Group, is trying to streamline and harmonize the end-to-end hiring process. AVIV Group is made up of 4 major brands that sit across Belgium, Germany, and France. And prior to sort of merging them all under the AVIV Group umbrella, they all had slightly different or no processes in place, and all have local legislation, which dictates slight nuances in how you hire. A small example would be in France, you can only advertise jobs in the French language, which means the LinkedIn, you don't get the easy apply button, because the easy apply button only appears when the job advert is in English. Something I never knew about until joining AVIV Group, but just a slight nuance which changes the candidate journey and therefore hiring. So there's some immediate challenges there in terms of 4 brands coming together, processes that are all trying to change. And if I could go back and start from zero, I wish I knew every key stakeholder within the hiring process, not personally, but just knew who they were and how they were involved. I can claim some ignorance, perhaps, as knowing who is who in a company that has recently merged with language barriers. that I had recently joined, not easy. But yeah, you need to get those key players into a room and bring them on the journey with you. I never really knew what change managers did within a company until I stepped into the shoes that I'm in now. And I now have a lot of respect for the skill it takes to create and embed change across a company of our size. It's a bit like pushing water uphill when you're trying to get a virtual room excited about changes or additions to a process they've been doing for years. So yeah, get the key players in a room from the start, understand who your stakeholders are that you're going to impact, try and influence all the way to the end, and get them right there at the start and get them understanding the reasons why this needs to be harmonized, why it needs to change. And so that they're bought in from the beginning, because the difficult part later on is trying to get their buy-in when you've already made the decision. You want that decision to feel like it's a almost like a collaboration, which it is. It doesn't need to feel like it needs to be a collaboration of people and their expertise.
Ryan, your background is, has a strong emphasis around employee branding. So are there two areas you would perhaps suggest perfecting or getting right first before you delve into other aspects around employee branding or getting into the realms of EVP?
Yeah, fair enough. So adverts and outreach. So I did a course run by someone called Mitch Sullivan, who is well worth a follow on LinkedIn. He's a very no-nonsense sort of guy, so as long as you're sort of expecting that. But the content he puts out about adverts and outreach and the comments he leaves on other people's posts are very insightful. So I would highly recommend you go and follow him first in terms of if you're looking to sort of understand how to improve your adverts and how to improve that outreach, which, as I say, ideally is your number one priority if you're looking at your sort of attraction sphere and engagement sphere. So in the course I did run by Mitch Sullivan, it was clear that a job description, which is typically your laundry list of responsibilities and requirements, that is not a job advert. So when you detail with the hiring manager, right, we want this person to do this and this much experience, and they must have these soft skills. Again, sort of like that's very top-down language. You're not going to excite anyone by telling them what they are going to do. It's sort of, you need to bring them into the story of the organization, the story of the role, and the story of the team. So an advert should be an advert, a shorter, less formal version that is built to engage people. That it's the one thing that majority of recruiters perhaps lack the training on, yet they rely so heavily on their advert to feed their pipeline. And similarly with outreach, they rely really heavily on sending these messages through LinkedIn or sending emails to their talent pools, but haven't had any sort of training on any copywriting or how to format those messages or what those messages should include. And we've all received them. We've all received a bad LinkedIn message. Yet when we're put in the position, and I've been in that position as well, and I'm sort of victim of this, well, not sort of victim. I've done this myself, where I've had to source a role really, really quickly. And so I've just thrown together a template with some language that says we need this and we need this and whatever it else it is, and haven't actually gone into the person's profile, seen how they might fit in, who they're connected to, what sort of courses they've done. So I haven't learned about the candidate. I've just said, I want this, are you this person? And it's more of a plea for attention than it is a message to engage that particular person. There's 1,001 articles out there that will tell you how to build a strong, personalized and engaging first, second, and third in mail. It's just putting the time in, which I appreciate. Again, recruiters are fairly time poor. They've got so much going on, a lot of expectation of them. So to also ask them, I'll put a personalized message together for these 200 candidates you need to source is difficult. But putting the time in, it will pay off. And again, with your adverts, don't just copy and paste the job description the hiring manager put together. They've put that together as like their absolute. That shouldn't be your advert. Your advert should be the thing you use to attract people, to put the time into. Think about the wording, think about the formatting of it. Is it short sentences, short paragraphs? Is it easy to read? Or is it just lengthy words, jargon, and nothing that's going to excite someone to click on apply?
As a TA leader, Ryan, obviously we understand that TA functions, recruitment functions are super busy, lots of priorities, sometimes reactive in a sense as well as being proactive. But with so much going on, as a TA leader, how do you measure the efficiency of the team? How do you know if they're doing enough of the right things, and when can you spot perhaps them maybe doing something not necessarily wrong, but isn't optimizing their time to the best use?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's like with all questions in recruitment, it's almost like it all depends, doesn't it? There's many different factors. And something I learned recently is that there is actually a difference between the titles of an HR team, a resourcing team, a recruitment team, and a talent acquisition team. These aren't just sort of titles we decide what our TA or recruitment team or resourcing team are. There's actually a direct correlation between what you measure yourself on and therefore the title your team should sit under. It's not an exact science, so let's call it my interpretation for now. But for example, if you are an HR team who do some recruitment on the side, are typically measuring number of hires, and that's it. Because their capacity to improve other metrics is pretty slim, because they're not only doing the recruitment on the side, but they've also got their HR operations, HR business partnering, advisory, administrating going on in the background. So their focus is just quantity versus requirement. A resourcing team is just that sort of like step up, and they might measure time to hire alongside sort of what roles you've got open versus what roles are active, those sorts of things. How quickly are you filling the amount of roles you've got? Recruitment teams, which again I would see as a level up, are probably the biggest jump, where their metrics will typically include candidate satisfaction, so those surveys, time to offer again, time to hire. So there's a difference. So what's the time between when you receive the requisition and the offer was sent to a candidate versus what was the time between the requisition landing with you and the candidate starting? That would be time to hire. Candidate quality. So there's plenty of ways to measure this. Did they leave within the first couple of months, first month? Do they measure up to any sort of values that you're measuring employees on? All those sorts of things, as well as sort of interview scores. Decline rates, so are people falling out of the process, and that's at application to interview to offer, or even sort of declining your offer when it's made to them, sorry. As well as going back to sort of that application conversion, how many applicants are converting, how many interviews are converting. And then the final step, the step that I think most companies call their teams nowadays, because it sounds sexier, it sounds more futuristic, is calling your team talent acquisition. But really, a talent acquisitions team metrics is all the way through the recruitment funnel. So from awareness all the way through to pre-boarding and new starter retention, every possible touch point should be measured. And that's how you know you're a talent acquisition team. And the best way to find out what title you sit under, so are you an HR team who does recruitment? Are you a resourcing team, a recruitment team, or a talent acquisition team? Is ask your management how they measure your team success. So if you show them engagement rates on LinkedIn and they look at you a bit lost and just ask you how many hires you've made, then you probably know where you are. There's 1,001 different ways you can measure the effectiveness of your team. I think from a C-suite's perspective, they're looking at right, well, how many offers are you making? How many hires are you making? The layers below that are probably looking at the quality of those hires. Are those people sticking around? How did they score in the interview? And then the layer below that, so your sort of HR managers, your TA directors, that sort of thing, are looking at that pipeline from A to B, or sorry, cradle to grave, I should say. So they would probably be interested in that engagement rate. They'd probably be interested in your candidate satisfaction scores. But the more you mature, as you go up those layers from HR managers to your directors to your C-suite, as you mature, they'll also then become interested in those more complex metrics, let's say. So it depends on the company. It depends on sort of your maturity as to what you consider yourself in terms of team, but also what you're measured on, and therefore where your focus should be.
So everybody, we've just reached the end of another Sub 1000 podcast. Thank you very much for your time, Ryan. You've shared some amazing insights into the world of TA. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. So everybody, Ryan is a member of the Sub 1000 community. So if there's anything you've heard about today which you might want a little bit more context or delve into, then I know Ryan would definitely welcome a connection or a message directly through the Sub 1000 community as well. So finally, just once again, thanks for your time, Ryan.
Thanks, Ben.